In today's video, I want to go over a tool that I have found for Premiere Pro that has really sped up my video workflow, specifically my color grading. If you're somebody who's interested in log footage, or maybe you're shooting log footage but have run into some troubles with color grading, this is going to be a tool that simplifies your workflow and gets you to a nice color grade quickly without having to be a colorist or dive into some really complicated tools like DaVinci Resolve. This tool is called Cinematch, and it's from the company that makes Film Convert Nitrate. This tool is around $150, but you can find it on sale. It is a one-time purchase, and it is worth every penny. Cinematch's biggest benefit is that it gives you a raw-like workflow. It makes it very easy to adjust your exposure, your contrast, your color with all the tools that you're familiar with. It does help you without using a waveform if you struggle with stuff like that, but it also gives you a good idea and a good starting point to jump into those things and the more complicated, complex things that a lot of people, when they're just getting started, struggle to understand. Now we're going to jump into Premiere Pro here in a second, but so you know what we're working with. All of these files have been shot on either the Nikon Z8 or the Nikon Z6 III in a 10-bit NLOG format. I am not using NRAW. NRAW is only usable in DaVinci Resolve at the moment, and I'm also not using ProRes. The reason I'm not going to be using these more expansive color spaces or codecs is because they don't really fit for what I do. Us in real estate photography, we need to have something that is lightweight, something that doesn't take up much space, and something that we can easily transfer and move around. And a lot of us are sending this stuff overseas. So when you shoot in an NRAW format or you shoot in ProRes, it tends to be a lot larger of a file size, and it just is a lot more to manage. So I like to work in the 10-bit H.265 codec, which is what we will be using. There's still plenty of data, and as long as you are good in the field at nailing your exposure, you're going to be just fine working with this and color grading in Premiere Pro. First things first, this is the Cinematch website. This is where you go to buy the tool. There is a free trial version of it. It is available for Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, and Final Cut Pro. They have their sensor match here and all the different cameras that they work for, and you guys can check that out if you would like. But this is where I got it, and you can see right now you can get them for about $119, and they do work with both Windows and Mac. So once you get it, you'll have the plugin installed, and it comes in as an effect. So let's go over to our editing real quick. It comes in as an effect. Now I have a couple of them set up here, but Cinematch just comes in as an effect. So what we have to do first, since we are working with NLOG, is we are going to go in here and we are going to grab all of our files. We're going to right click them and go to modify and choose color. Now the reason we're going to modify the color is because they are currently in Rec 709, and if you know or you have watched anything on how to grade NLOG footage from Nikon themselves, you'll know that NLOG is shot in Rec 2020. So we need to go here and change it to Rec 2020. One important thing to note as of the time of recording this in October or November of 2024, this Nikon NLOG Rec 2020 is not what you want to use. If you're going to use Cinematch, it, I believe, attempts to convert the NLOG footage over and change it to Rec 2020. I have found it to not be give pleasing results. I have found it to be quite poor in how it does things. So for what we're doing, we want to go to Rec 2020, and we are going to hit OK. And instantly, a lot of our scenes get a lot more color. They look a lot better, and it is just a more pleasing experience to look at overall. Now this, I think all of these are shot on the Z6, so we should be good. I believe they are. Let's see, 5K, 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 5K. Yeah, okay, because I oversample everything. So these are all on the Z6. So once we get that done, we're going to go back to our effects. You'll type in Cinematch, and you will drag this out, and we will put it on all of our clips. You can do it all at once if you hold Shift, I believe, or you have them all selected, but for the purposes of this, I'm just going to drag it on each one individually. Now, we have got, this is a really tiny screen from what I'm used to, as many of you know, so give me just a moment. There we go. Okay, so now that we have it converted to Rec 2020, it is time to come in here and pick our camera. Now, one thing I have found about Cinematch, especially working with Nikon cameras, is that Cinematch tends to only be tailored more to the more popular formats, the more popular camera makers, like Sony and, Sony, Red, Arri, any of them that you can think, Blackmagic, all that, Canon. For us Nikon guys, since Nikon is just now barely starting to scratch the surface of good video, we don't have a whole lot to choose from. So we're going to go here and we are going to select our camera make, and that is going to be Nikon. They will not have the Z6 III or the Z8. They only have the Z6 and the Z9. I use the Z9 in the NLOG Rec 2020 color profile, and I hit apply. And you'll notice nothing changes. This is where you can either choose to change your camera over to a different sensor. So you could pick, if we wanted to, we can pick the popular Sony FX3, which is really popular right now, and you can pick all of the different ones. We'll go with S-Log3 Cinetone, hit that, and you'll notice it changes. And this moves it over into the sensor color space of the FX3. And you'll notice it's still in log. So the next thing that we do is we will go and hit the apply the Rec 709 color transformation. And boom, it brings it in to the Rec 709 color space, and it's ready to go. You don't need to use a LUT. You don't need to use anything else. You can come into some of these other tabs here if you're having some issues. This working color space I would leave alone. There is no Rec 2020 in it. And you can mess with these guys. If at any point you're like, I wonder what this does, you can click these little eye icons for information, and it will take you to the website of Cinematch, and they will have that specific thing broken down, and they will give you the best guidelines for how to use some of these things. You can toggle these and see if you get better results. Sometimes you can get more contrast, less contrast. Ideally, you would like it to be somewhere in the middle. You don't want it to feel too log looking, and you don't want it to be super heavy contrast, at least in my opinion, because I like to add the contrast. I don't like to have it have the contrast, like tell me what the contrast is. You kind of fight things when it's that way. It's how I work with all my photos as well, from a very flat perspective, and then bring the stuff in. I personally like to work on red, and I use red dragon color and do this. I find that the greens to be a little bit more vibrant, and I find it to be a little bit more of what I like and where I want to be. So the next thing that we do now that we have transformed our color space, also alternatively, if you don't want to do anything, you can leave this turned off, and this will just basically be a LUT conversion in NLOG, and we can just leave that off. And for now, we can just actually go that route instead of converting it over on this clip. So we're going to move down here, and this is just like it is in Lightroom. Exposure, we have our temperatures and tints. Now, one thing that is nice about this, if you don't want to come in and learn how to use a scope, say it's a little bit intimidating to you, say all this stuff is like, wow, I just don't know what's going on. It's too much. They make it very easy to to use the same idea, but they make it in a more easy to understand format. And what I mean by that is you use this false color guide. Again, you can click on it, and we will click on this one so that you guys can see it. And we have exposure is middle gray. And what this is going to do is going to map the middle gray for Rec 709. You will pick an area of the image that you would like to expose in the mid-range. And with the false color applied, move the exposure slider until that area appears green. And when that area appears green, that means that it is correctly exposed. So we will go in and do that. Click our false color here, we're on middle gray. And this is our green tint here, and as we move that slider around, it changes. And we say, okay, where do we want that to be? Well, we kind of want it to be on the face of the house like that. And if we go and turn that false color off, we can see pretty well exposed. The next one is going to be your skin tones. This is for if you are shooting people, if you are shooting yourself. This is not skin tone color. This will show you on skin tone what is the correct exposure, much like the green. We just ignore it for most of this unless you have an agent on camera or you're filming yourself for social media. We're going to go to temperature and click that false color. Now, this is going to show you the things that are blue are cool. The things that are orange are warm. Ideally, you want to pick something neutral. Now, a lot of times when we're doing this really quick, it's not that easy, and I tend to adjust it and then eyeball it. You can see our shadows are still pretty warm, and those should be a little bit cool. So this image is fairly warm. So we'll take that and we'll adjust it down. Now, I tend to, like I said, not go too crazy, and I like my images to be just a little bit more warm. And you can see I'm ignoring this because this is just completely screwed up because of that false color. So we'll change that false color back. And there we go, it's a nice neutral image. Now this day, there was a fire burning, so it is a little bit tinted and a little bit more warm. I tend to like my images to be slightly more warm. I feel like they feel a little more inviting when they are, so I'm gonna go with this. Next, we're going to go to the tint and do the same thing with that false color. You can see pretty much everything is green, and if we move it around, things can change. Green can start bleeding out, and the things that are magenta now have way too much magenta. And again, you wanna look in the neutral areas. And so I'm kind of looking up here, which you can't see. I'm looking right up here in this shadow area. You can click that button to reset. I think I'm gonna go a little bit to the right, and let's just see what that looks like. I think that looks pretty good. Then we scroll down here. This is your basic HSL, hue versus saturation, hue versus hue, hue versus luminance. And you can pick a target. You can pick a target and say like, I don't know. We'll say this dark green, and we can pick a lighter green color and say we want it to match this, and boom, hit it, and it will change that color. Now, this is just an example. I'm not going to do that. One thing you can do for this guy is you can go hue versus saturation, and you can select your source and say like, we want this light blue here. And we go to our target, we want it to be a little bit darker. Boom. That's the luminance, which we didn't want, so we'll go back, make sure we're on saturation. Let's see if we can pull that guy down a little bit more, or up to increase the saturation. You can see this is a way to target different areas of your image. So we're going to go ahead and turn that off because I tend to keep things a lot more neutral, and I find that for myself, when I get into doing stuff like that, I tend to overdo it and it just starts to look fake and false. And I only really do it if there is like a very, very specific example, say like a light that is just extremely the wrong color, or there's a really bad wash of color on something, I will start to use this. Largely because a lot of what this is already very well exposed and very well shot from the beginning. The white balance is good, everything is correct. So we will move down now to our secondary controls. You can do these these secondary controls. The match refinements, like I said, are just the hue versus saturation and all that stuff. So this is where in this one you can do the color wheels if you'd like. They also have down here a way to boost your shadows if you need a little bit of extra luminance in them. These tend to be very reactive, so I use them very carefully. Pull your highlights down now because this is not a raw image and there is a limited data set in it. It is going to not work exactly like a raw file, and that's something to remember, that if you're not working with a raw format and that just massive amount of data, there's only so much you can do. I tend to only usually adjust the shadows on these sometimes when it's just a little bit too much contrast. You can come down here, and here's our saturation slider. I find doing it this way, the saturation is usually pretty spot on. If I want to add more, I would usually only go to about 1.1. You can do it to your taste, but we are going to leave it at like 1.8 on this one, just so we don't go crazy. We can come in here to our curves if we want to, and this is where you can add some more contrast. If you're like, well, it just needs just a little bit more here, so you want to do that, add a nice subtle S to it, pull up those mid-tones a little bit. You can do that. Again, I think with the way that this grades, it's very, very quick, and I don't really need to add any of it because it is already contrasty enough. The lens that I'm using in this one does have a pretty bad vignette on it. I do have a fix for it, which I will throw on here really quick. Oopsie daisy. Scroll up. And this is the biggest difference if you are somebody who uses DaVinci Resolve, is that this layered way of editing is not as intuitive, it's not as easy, and it is not as detail-oriented as DaVinci Resolve is. And that is one thing about the two different programs that is very nice about DaVinci Resolve. I choose to use Premiere Pro because I live in the Adobe ecosystem and I grew up on it. I'm just faster with it and I can just flexibly use things. There are pros and cons to both, and we're not going to get in it in this tutorial. But that would be the biggest difference if you are wondering or if you are coming from that. So we have our vignette fix first, and you can see that just applies a nice little bit amount of fixing of the vignette so that it looks more even. And right there, we've got a very good image. We have really good grade. And I would leave it right where it is. And so once that's done, you can then take that and you can take both of these layers and copy them over to the next one if you'd like to. And we can see how they translate. That's going to be an interior. Let's go and do this guy. Oop. And you can see, boom, you copy and paste it and it translates really, really well. And you can quickly move through it if you want to do it that way. We are going to hand grade all of these just to have it. So in this guy, I'm going to put my vignette fix on because this is that same lens. We'll come in here. You will choose our camera and all that good stuff. But one thing I will also show you that you can do is you have these presets. And once you get something set up, before I adjust anything on the exposure and the color and everything like that, I save a preset. So you can just come in here, right click it, save preset, and name it what you want, and it comes into this preset folder. So I have my Cinematch Z6 III interior, and I drag it and drop it, and boom. It's ready to go. All I have to do is come in here, grab the middle gray, adjust this around until I'm like, okay, that's got where I want it to be. Let's do our temperature. Feels slightly warm. We can pull down a little bit. Look at our tint. Tint seems to be pretty good. Turn off the false color, and boom, there we go. We're just about where we want to be. This is where, if you do want to look over at your scopes, this is where you can see if it's where you want it to be or where it should be as far as a scope goes. Typically, if you're going to be looking at highlights, you're going to be looking anywhere from the upper mid-tones to the highlights from 50 up to 80. 90 is going to be really high, and 100 is going to be just pure white, which we can see here in this visual representation. So I usually have my scope up just so I can kind of look at it and say, okay, that looks a little bit better. That's where I want to be. And let me just kind of pull my color a little bit to the right. And that's it. That's all I have to do. I don't have to adjust anything else. It's just copy, paste, ready to go, done. I don't need to mess around with Lumetri color and have LUTs. I don't need to mess around with anything else. And I find this to be such a quicker way to do it. So we'll come into this one, same thing. I'm just going to drag and drop. This is not shot with the 14mm. This is the 40mm. So we're going to drop our Z6 exterior on it. Boom, just like that. Looks good. Let's go and do our quick little middle gray. Let's see where we're at here. False color. Let's maybe, let's see. We kind of like the sky, this one to be it, because that's what we want to show off was the sunrise. Let's check our temperature. I'm going to use the ground color here. I'm going to make it a little bit warmer to where it turns neutral and turns gray. There we go. Check our tint. Our tint is green. Let's take that till it goes to gray, which is right about in there. It's not perfect. Turn that off. And it is a little bit dark, and we can see that from this scope. So let's kind of turn that up a little bit. And there we go. Just like that, nice and easy. You get a beautiful grade with that sun stars peeking through. Really nice color. Everything looks great. Let's go into this guy. Same thing. And I'm only doing this to show you how fast you guys can do this and get it done. And this one, we'll just use our scopes and we'll kind of turn us down a little bit. The sun was glaring really bad and blowing out in the sky right here. And so this shot is a little overexposed, but that is all right. And take this guy and tailor it to our green. I think it's definitely a little bit green right there. There we go. Perfect. And again, this is just my Z9 NLOG Rec 2020 with the red dragon color profile. You can pick whatever you want. I just picked it because I've always thought red cameras were super neat. And I like how it looks. There are a million different cameras that you can use though. And we'll come over here, pop this guy on. Again, looks really good. Right away, this is just showing off that beautiful detail on this really high-end old barnwood countertop. So we'll hit this guy and we'll see where does that detail show up, probably like right in there. We will go and do our temperature. This one's pretty tough because there is not really a lot neutral in here that we can look at. So this is where I like to eyeball it and say, what does it feel like it needs? I think it just needs a hair of warmth. And I know these windows here are super green because they were tinted, so we're gonna add just a little bit of magenta to it. Now this does feel pretty dark, so I'm gonna go and turn that. Let's pull right to there. And we'll grab these shadows and we'll kind of give it a little bit of a boost. Nothing too crazy because we don't need to see a whole lot of this. We're focused on countertop, just like that. And just like that, we were able to knock out color grades on all of these, get them that delogged footage done. And it looks really good, really quickly, gives you a nice amount of contrast, and Cinematch has been a huge time saver for me. And you can get as complicated with it as you want, or you can do like I have and really set up kind of a batch processing of it. It works really well as well if after this you want to go and add a Rec. 709 LUT on a different layer up here so that you can have a final grade or a final look on it. You would do that by going into your panel here. Project, new, adjustment layer. We'll grab that adjustment layer, put it over the top of these guys, pull it over, click on this guy, and then this is where you would go and use Lumetri color to pick a grade. I have a bunch of LUTs loaded into my creative one. I typically usually like to use these visions, but you are more than welcome to use any one of these that you would want. We can pick like a Fuji, throw it on. You can adjust the intensity if you want. You can pick Kodak. All of these different ones. Like I said, I tend to usually like to stick to my visions one because I think they give like a really nice amount of color. And if it's a little too much for you, you can pull it down 75%, whatever feels right to you. And then now we have everything graded with that look on it that's nicely saturated. Gives us a really pretty look on it. Turn it on and off, see there. Gives us a little bit more contrast. And that is how you would produce a final grade for your films or your home tours or what have you. And it is a very quick and easy way to do it when it seems to be, log can be a little bit frustrating to work with, or you find that the LUTs that you're working with that Nikon provides just aren't doing it. And it's that simple. Cinematch makes it easy for me to get the grade that I'm looking for quickly. It has tools that are very user-friendly and beginner-friendly and can help you learn how to use things like the scopes and how to do things like hue versus saturation, hue versus luminance, and how they all work. It's a very easy plugin, and it is something that I think has been worth every penny for me. They are continually updating it, and they are adding new features. If you want to use Film Convert Nitrate as well, they pair great and they work really, really well together with that sensor conversion so that you can get the look that you're going for. When I first started, I was using just straight out of camera flat color profiles, already converted to Rec. 709. NLOG was not something that had been around for a very long time, or it was very easy to do. You needed to have an Atomos Ninja to record it, and a lot of the time it was very fiddly and it was a very rudimentary log version. It was nowhere near as polished as Canon, as Sony, or as any of the big box cameras like Red, or any of the bigger higher end cameras. But this has made my workflow much easier, and now that Nikon has a better version of NLOG and an NLOG that seems to work a lot better than the old Z7, I highly recommend checking this out if you're looking for something that is quick and easy. You can find more information on Cinematch's website. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any comments, questions. I'd love to help you out. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.